We will ask our Madam City Clerk to call to order.
Thank you. Good evening. Mayor John Harabedian.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem John Kaposha.
Here.
Councilmember Rochelle Arzmende.
Present.
Councilmember Denise Delmar.
Here.
Councilmember Jean Goss.
Here.
Mr. Mayor, you have a quorum and may conduct city business.
Great. Thank you very much. Please stand for the pledge and invocation by Councilmember Delmar.
I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So I have a very brief inspiration. It's not really an inspiration as much as it is a request that everybody please go get their flu shot. It is expected to be a really bad season this year, almost as bad as the one we had about 3 years ago, if you all remember that. So by October 31st, I hope everybody gets their flu shots. You can get it at pharmacies. A lot of them are no cost, especially for our seniors like myself. It's important that you get that flu shot this year. So please take my advice.
Well done.
All right. Thank you.
Forgot to do that.
I got mine already.
Do it.
Okay. Approval of the agenda.
Looks good to me. I'll move to approve.
All right. Second.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. And we'll go on to the minutes. Any changes to the minutes?
Nope.
Not from me.
Perfect as usual.
Move to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And now we'll go to mayor and city council reports, and I'll start on my left. Councilmember Arzmendi.
Just an announcement, not necessarily a report, but in the Mountain View News last week, and I know there's been some social media posts about it, but Pasadena Unified School District Board meeting, it's a special meeting, will be occurring on Thursday. They have different scenarios for a second wave of school closures. As if some of you have been following, I think there were 3 elementary schools that were voted in for closing for next year, and this happened a couple weeks ago. But the second set is going to be up for vote on Thursday. Sierra Madre Middle School is one of the scenarios. It's one of, I think, 4 or 5 scenarios. I am told and reassured it's unlikely that that closure will happen, but I don't think as residents and parents that we should take it for granted. And I know there are definitely groups that are speaking out on behalf of Sierra Madre to ensure that it's not one of the schools considered for closure, but I do want to encourage folks to, again, not take it for granted. And if you can attend on Thursday, it starts, I believe, at 4:30.
Thank you.
Just following up on that, don't forget our representative on the board is Sierra Madre's own Larry Torres. He's now the president of the board, so you might want to look up his email address and send him an email if you can't make that meeting. I just wanted to say something very briefly about the wine tasting the other night. I just wanted to again commend the Friends of the Library for another really wonderful event. It just went off beautifully. We got a break on the weather. It was supposed to rain, but it didn't. So I think the cards were just right. And just wanted to commend them for a wonderful job once again.
Nothing from me.
I did attend the dedication for the new Alverno athletic field the other day.
Nice.
And, you know, if you haven't seen it, drive by. I think it's Wilson Street is the street next to it. Just take a glance. It is really, really first rate. And I think that school, you know, is an asset to our community, and even more so now with that beautiful athletic field. So that's all I have to report.
Yeah, it's gorgeous, and I'm sorry I missed that. And I agree, the wine tasting was great as always, and hopefully it raised some good money for the Friends and ultimately for the library. And I have nothing else. So we'll move on to public comment for items not on the agenda.
Joanne Williams, Colony Drive. I'm here to give you a brief report on one of your most important commissions, the Senior Community Commission. We have completed some activities this year, including the production of the resource guide. I hope you all have one. We have mailed many to all the seniors in the city, and we have them some at the Park House. If you don't, this is great. If you're an old lady like me and don't know the best handyman in town, this is how you find out. This is part of our goal to provide information about community resources to our seniors. We have accomplished the reception for the Older American of the Year, a very well-attended event. We also took part in the community yard sale, and we, the commission members, were in charge of a little booth that was coffee and donuts and chit-chat and wander around and see what all the goodies were that were for sale. We also sponsored the rock concert and gave popsicles to everybody in sight. We have several ongoing activities. They're year-round, and our goal here is to provide quality programs. The senior excursions are probably the best attended. Comfortable bus, go to the Reagan Library, the Chocolate Factory in Irvine, who knew? And to the Alpaca Farm in Temecula, places like that, and spend the day. We also have a lot of activities going on in that Little Heart Park House. Bingo, and this is serious. You don't sit down with one card, I found out. You must have 5 or 6 spread around. They knew how to keep up. We have movies there every month. We provide a birthday cake once a month for celebrations, games, and that includes poker. Yoga, and those are some of the best attended events that we have there, because at one of them, the chair yoga, which is one I like because it's not too hard, we had over 118 people attending during 1 month. We also have crafts, free legal advice, a library that is without any trouble. All you do is go take a book. You don't have to say anything to anybody. Hopefully you'll bring one back. And we have computers that are used there at that place. The senior moments, I trust all of you are getting them because they list everything that's going on. And if you're not on the, you guys are on the list. Nod your heads like you've seen them before. All right, I'll take care of that. And we have a lot of great speakers coming in every month. They deal with things like that are mysterious for old folk like me: tap cards, Social Security, safe driving, be thankful, voting procedures. We had that just this week, the new voting procedures, and there were over 20 people there to learn about it, and information about Medicare, et cetera, et cetera. Our current projects that we're aiming for and working on include transportation. Our goal here is to provide adequate transportation for all seniors. It's kind of a long, drawn-out program, but we have a subcommittee that meets with officials, and we are seeking to expand the services that are presently offered. We also try to attend meetings of special interest like the Kirsten Court Project, and we always have someone there to find out what's going on. Our Christmas luncheon is coming up, and we are hopeful for, in the future, a reorganization, maybe expansion of the work space at the Park House. City employees have an office there. It's about the size of a nice closet. There are 3 people in there working. When I walk in, if I'm not careful where I'm stepping, Lauren Hines has a big project on the floor that she's working on. It's just an impossible situation. Maybe we can see that that's improved. I want to thank Rebecca Silva, Lauren Hines, Clarissa Lowe, and Rosemary Garcia for their dedication. They do the really hard work as far as our activities are concerned. And special thanks to Mr. Capocha. He is charged with meeting with 1 or 2 of us occasionally to give us advice and to answer questions that we may have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and City Council. I'm Vickery Murphy with Senator Portantino's office, and I am stopping by because we're having a mosquito forum on October 19th. It's not in Sierra Madre, but it's close to Sierra Madre. It's at the PCC site that's across from the Avon building on Foothill, and it's on October 19th from 2 to 4 p.m., but the vector control district people from the 2 different districts that occupy most of our Senate district will be there to answer lots of questions. Also, the doctor from the health department in Pasadena is going to be there with medical answers, and it's come with all your questions. And I know that everybody is being eaten alive by those Aedes mosquitoes everywhere they go, as you guys all know. And so it's in part for them to teach people how to kind of adopt their own little, not even your neighborhood, right, but your own household and the adjacent households, to go door to door and help people figure out where is the tiny bit of standing water for this little circle right here that we can eliminate to then get rid of that little pocket of this invasive mosquito, one little tiny circle of people at a time. So anyway, I hope that you guys can make it. I know that the community services people from Sierra Madre, they have this flyer electronically. I will hand this out to you guys, and there are some on the table out there. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council. October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month, so I wanted to come this evening and talk a little bit about the Pink Patch Project. So you'll see this month our officers will be out in the field wearing pink patches on their uniforms, and it's an initiative that started with the LA County Police Chiefs Association, and it's to help raise awareness for breast cancer and to raise funds for research. And our particular charity in LA County is the City of Hope, which is close to us and does tremendous work in this field. And so it began actually in 2015 with Seal Beach starting this thing. And then Irwindale picked it up the next year, and then they brought it to LA County Police Chiefs Association, and since then it's taken off. So everyone in LA County participates, and we're now up to 390 agencies across the country, which is really exciting. And this year, for the first time, we have 3 foreign countries' agencies participating as well. So over the last 3 years, we've raised over $1 million in LA County for breast cancer research for the City of Hope. So we will have patches available for sale for $10. We have keychains for $5, or if someone would just like to, donate to the Pink Patch Project, all of the funds that are raised go directly to the City of Hope. So just wanted you to know, so when you see us all out here in our pink patches, that's what it's about. Thank you.
Thank you. That's
Chief.
great.
Great cause. Where can we buy just in the police department?
Yes, you can come to the police department and pick them up at any time.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other public comment for items not on the agenda? If not, we'll move on to our consent calendar. Madam City Clerk.
Thank you. We have 3 items tonight. Item 1A is award of professional services contract to SA Associates for the design of the 2020 water main replacement project. Item 1B, consideration of November and December City Council meeting schedule. And 1C, adoption of Resolution 19-53 approving certain demands. And that concludes the consent calendar.
Thank you. Any questions?
None.
None from me. All right, we'll open up for public comment. Questions? And seeing none, we'll bring it back. Any discussion before motion? If not, I'll take a motion.
Move to approve the consent calendar.
Second.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, and that's unanimous. We'll move on to our first public hearing, the adoption of the California Building Code 2019. And that is going to be Jim Guerra.
Mayor and council members, this is the triannual adoption of the building codes. As you recall, the state of California every 3 years adopts new building codes, and as part of that process allows the local jurisdictions to make amendments as needed for it, but as a minimum it requires the adoption of the state building code. We have in the past have a number of amendments to the code that we've carried on for a number of years, and we also adopt by reference the standards for the county offices on that. So the alternates before you are to introduce Ordinance 1416 for first reading by title only, or to direct staff to revise Ordinance 1416 and conduct first reading as amended by title. Our recommendation is alternate number 1, that the council introduce for first reading by title only the adoption of ordinance 1416 pursuant to 2019 California Building Standard attachments. As indicated, the state adopts the building code first, but actually it's written on a national basis by ICC and NFPA, and then it's brought forward by the state. They review it every 3 years, adopt state amendments to it, and then they allow 180 days for the local jurisdictions to make local amendments. What you have before you today is a continuation of our local amendments to the building code. And we are proposing to adopt the California Building Code with amendments, the California Residential Code with amendments, the California Mechanical Code with amendments, the California Electrical Code with amendments, California Plumbing Code with amendments. In addition, we also adopt the existing building code as written by ICC. We again adopt the California Green Building Code. We adopt the California Energy Code, and then in support of this is the California Reference Code on that. These are all the 2019 codes. In the ordinance before you, there's a continuation of previous codes. It's the enforceability of the code and supplemental to existing laws. And then we do the modifications which are attached. The severability, effective date, the CEQA exemption for the ordinance, publication and certification. Again, under the financial review, there is no physical impact related to the city in the ordinance of 1416. Staff time was incurred in the preparation and draft of the ordinance. Second item before you today will be similar for the fire code on that. There is a CEQA exemption for this environmental on pursuing this. This notice has been, public notice has been produced on this and notified in the regular manner at the usual position, city public counter, public library, and also on our website. So before you is our recommendation to adopt the codes as amended. Again, this is the, every 3 years it's brought before you for this adoption. There's quite a few attachments here. I'll be glad to answer questions if I can.
Questions?
Just a general question, if I may. Thank you, Mr. Guerra, for that report. Were there any major concerns, any red flags? Were there any surprises in this version?
No, I think the one that's been of most interest is the Energy Code amendment. We previously had a requirement for all new single-family dwellings to be solar ready. That was put in 2 code cycles ago. The state is now requiring that all new single-family dwellings permitted after January 1st must in fact have solar voltaic systems on them. The exception would be those that apply for plan check before that date. But going forward in the next code cycle is all new single-family dwellings have to be solar, have photovoltaic systems, not just solar ready. It's probably the biggest change in the code that stood out.
Thank you.
This question, on the amendments, are there any new amendments? Are these just the amendments that were carried over from the last?
Continuous amendments. You'll find the consistency here with here and the fire code. We continue those forward.
Okay.
So there's nothing, and that was going to be my question. Is there anything new here that staff needs to get up to speed on that would affect, other than the energy code? For example, there's a provision about the demolition of historic buildings.
That's a continuation of our
Just a
previous,
continuation.
It's consistent with planning. And both our cities, our contract staff through Wildan is attending seminars on it for the new code adoption to become familiar with them. It is not a major change such 2 code cycles ago when we statewide mandatory residential sprinklers, nothing of that degree.
Okay. All right. We'll open up for public comment. And seeing none, we'll bring it back. Any discussion?
None for me.
Nothing.
All right. How about a motion to adopt it?
Okay, I will move that we introduce ordinance 1416 for first reading by title only.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Thank you, Mr. Guerra. And now Captain Snyder will come up for the 2019 Fire Code adoption.
Evening, Mr. Mayor, Council. I'm not going to repeat what Jim said because he did such a wonderful job. This is the same process that we go through the building code. We also go with the fire code. So I bring before you tonight ordinance 1417, and that's adoption of the 2019 California Fire Code. Like the building code, we're carrying over the amendments, the prior amendments. Not a significant change. The only two changes is adding an alternative design option for fire sprinklers to make it a little easier and more cost-effective for residential fire sprinklers by allowing people to use the California Residential Code. And modifying fire sprinklers in trust attics, a little less restrictive on that. Everything else is pretty straightforward from before. So our recommendation tonight is to introduce 1417 by title only for its first reading. Alternative would be to bring it back to staff for amendments. And then our recommendation, of course, is to adopt by title only. And I'm available if you have any questions.
Thank you. Any questions?
No?
None for me either. We will open this up for public comment and questions. And seeing none, we'll bring it back. Any discussion before a motion?
Nope.
All right, I'll take a motion.
Move to approve ordinance 1417 for first reading by title only.
Yeah, I'll second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
That's unanimous. Next item is a consideration of appointment to fill a vacancy on the Senior Community Commission, and our applicant is Ms. Jackie Pergola.
Good afternoon, good evening, Mayor, members of the City Council. And at the previous council meeting, at the direction of Mayor Pro Tem John Capocha, the city staff was directed to return to this meeting with an application for filling the vacancy currently on the Senior Community Commission. The Senior Community Commission vacancy occurred at the conclusion of Commissioner Bartoli's the end of her term in June, and the vacancy has occurred for the last 3 months or so. The one application that we received is by Jackie Pergola, and the application is here for your consideration. Mrs. Pergola was notified, and she is present if you have any questions.
Great.
That concludes my presentation this evening.
Thank you. I don't know if there's going to be any questions here. I think this will be pretty quick. So we can probably allow everyone to sit down. We could probably just open it up for public comment for anyone that needs to say anything. But
Does Ms. Mercola want to say something?
she could. Yeah, I think she's great. But feel free.
I would just like to say thank you so much for considering me, and it really is a pleasure to serve on this commission. I thought I could bring in a lot of new ideas and leadership, but I'll tell you, these gals and any gentlemen that have been on the commission have done an unbelievable job, and they're really working for the city and the seniors, and thank you. It's going to be a pleasure to serve on it.
Thank you. So we'll bring it back, and does someone want to make a formal recommendation?
Well, as the liaison to the Senior Commission, I would like to have the honor of doing that.
All
I would
right.
like to recommend to the mayor that we appoint Ms. Pergola to the Senior Commission.
Great.
I would be happy to second. I was going to joke and say I never see her at any events, but we know she's extremely involved, and you obviously have a cheerleading group here because they are evidence as to your participation and your volunteerism throughout many different events in the city, not just with the Senior Commission.
Great. Well, based on that motion second, I'll recommend the appointment. All those in favor? Aye. And that's unanimous. Congratulations. Thank you very much for your help.
Thank you, Jackie.
Great. And now we'll move on to item 3B, the authorization to pay expenditures related to the November 5th, 2019 special election.
Okay. Mayor, members of the City Council, at the July 9th City Council meeting, the council authorized a special election to be held in the city on November 5th, 2019, next month. The election will be consolidated with Los Angeles County. It is the Citizens Initiative, Measure S. It is the only item on the ballot. The city has received a cost estimate from the county. Approximately $104,000 will be the cost of the special election. In addition to that, there will be some limited costs pertaining to training and pertaining to voter education regarding the new ballot measures. The city has taken some steps in collaboration with the county to educate our citizens and our voters on the new ballot machines. It is recommended that the City Council approve an increase to the fiscal year 2019-2020 budget in the amount of $110,000 related to the special election on November 5th, 2019. The City Council, when they approved the election on July 9th, had already previously approved the 2019-2020 budget, so this was not approved under the budget, and so staff is asking for an amendment to approve those additional expenditures. That concludes my report. I'm available for any questions if you'd like.
Thank you. Any questions?
Well, the only question I have would be, do we have room to include that in the budget?
As Mayor Pro Tem Capocha, we will be able to, if council increases the budget, we will be able to cover the costs.
Okay. Thank you. We'll open it up for any questions or public comment.
Hi, I'm Pat Alcorn, and I live on Grandview. There was some questions on the social media last week when people received their sample ballots, and some of it was a little curious, but they thought this was something that was undercover or underhanded, that's something that the City Council did. And I want to reiterate that this is a citizens' initiative, that we had about 10 to 15 people that we went door to door and Christian Court to some of the organizations to get this initiative placed on the ballot. And as reported on July 9th, you did approve that. And I do want to thank you for that, because there were a lot of people that worked really hard to get this on the ballot. So I hope everyone votes yes.
You're here. Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members. The name is Gary Hood, live on North Baldwin. And I too want to thank you for considering and budgeting this. November 5th is a very important day that I hope the community can remember to get out and vote. Measure S, I think, is very important to the community, in fact that it brings 100% of the sales tax to the community. And being that the cities around us have done this, I feel this is very important. And to help everybody remember that November 5th, voting yes on Measure S, there will be some yard signs out to remind everybody. This is very important. It's going to bring over $200,000 to the general fund, with none of this money going to the county. 100% goes to the city. So I hope that everyone sees the importance and gets out and vote November 5th for yes on Measure S. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gary. Great. Bring it back for discussion. Any comments?
Yeah, I just want to thank Ms. Alcorn and Mr. Hood for their effort in driving this citizens initiative. And again, you're wonderful citizens of Sierra Madre, and I appreciate that you have the city in mind and have made the effort to lead this. So appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Hear, hear. And I do think that the comment about everyone getting out to actually vote, becoming involved, is important. So hopefully there'll be more communication from the citizens group about the election coming up, and you'll see more information about it. But it is creeping up on us, less than a month away now. So with that, I will take a motion.
I'll move to approve it.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. We will move on to 3C, the wheeling agreement between cities of Arcadia and Sierra Madre.
Thank you, Mayor. Director Reynoso is out this evening, so I will be handling the discussion for him. We also have our board representative to the Water District, Miles Prince, here, if you have any questions for him. And Director Semino will also be helping out. The interconnection wheeling agreement is designed to make formal our current informal agreement where Arcadia has from time to time delivered water for us. It will also provide access immediately upon execution to a third source of water for the city. But the big deal that staff is excited about is this is a precursor to an agreement of a joint well, which we jointly fund, pay for, and operate, which would further diversify the water system that we have. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions, and Mr. Prince or Director Semino are as well.
Any questions?
This isn't, I'm sorry, this isn't the well that we're doing tonight, right? This is the precursor to it.
Correct, Councilmember Delmar. This would be a standard wheeling agreement. In the recitals, we make reference to a further agreement of a joint operating well, but this would not be binding upon either Sierra Madre or Arcadia for the joint location operation of a well.
Yeah, I'll save my for comment later.
I have a question. Because our agreement with the Metropolitan Water District right now is basically we give them 2 gallons for every gallon we get back. And I forget what this well will provide up to 2,000 acre feet per year. I haven't done the arithmetic, but we're going to save money by having Arcadia deliver water then, right?
The goal of the joint well would be to produce 2,000 acre feet. That's the estimate. It could be more or less when you finally dig it and you see what type of water you get. So that is the estimate of the joint well. The main benefit is it would be San Gabriel main basin water that can go directly into our system. The cost would be cheaper than Met water, direct Met water than what the other cities are paying. It would likely be a little more expensive than the water we're receiving now. It would certainly be cheaper for our water district if we go down this route.
Yeah, okay, I see. So that's the financial advantages to the water district itself. Okay. Should we have?
Can I just follow up? My question was going to be on the costs really quickly. I know we're going to bring in basically an independent engineer slash appraiser who's going to come up with the cost of actually pumping and delivering the water and everything. That's fine, but are we doing that on a yearly basis, or is it just every time we need water? Because it seems like that's going to be somewhat of a administrative issue if every time we need, whatever it is, 500 acre feet or less, we have to bring in an independent kind of study to come up with the cost.
So, Mayor, it would be done initially before we accepted any water for the first time, and thereafter, in a reasonable time frame. I would not even think it would be an annual undertaking. You would have to have some type of change, for example, a dramatic increase in the cost of electricity, or something like that would then cost Arcadia or cause Arcadia to want to revisit it. So I wouldn't even consider it likely to be an annual report that's done. As long as both parties are satisfied with the initial report, it would probably go forward for quite some time.
Okay. And can you just explain the last point that you had said before I asked my question was it's less expensive for the water district. Why is that?
The water district right now is the one that's actually supplying the 2-for-1 deal that Mayor Pro Tem brought up. So under this deal, if we're importing water from Arcadia, that would give our water board the ability to enter into a renegotiation with Met and try and make it more of a standard water delivery agreement as opposed to 2-for-1. The total allocation that our water district gets annually, we are a bigger percentage of that because of the 2-for-1 than our actual water demand should be. So they're paying in water and we're paying in money, and the water is much more valuable.
Yeah.
Especially when it's scarce.
Okay.
I have one more question.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. This is right in the last paragraph, the last sentence before the financial review source of funding. It says here, diversify the city's water availability, provide redundancy of delivery options, and grant access to treated water. How would this be giving us treated water? Wouldn't it be untreated?
I'm going to let Director Semino answer that.
This water will be the same water that's going through the Arcadia distribution system now. So it's going to be their treated water, treated as in their filtration and their chlorination.
I see, okay. So when we do a well, is the intent to have Arcadia treat that water as well?
Yeah, if the well needs treatment, which you really don't know until you start producing it, that will be part of our cost to pay for our portion of the treatment for that well, for the water that we receive.
I see, and the reason for that is because, again, because of the plumbing right now is for treated water.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. All right, great, thank you.
Yeah. And any other questions? I just have one more. And I talked about this a little bit with the city manager. The emergency section, I guess, is the only thing where it's, I think, a little bit more Arcadia friendly, which makes sense. I mean, it's their water, they're delivering it. But it basically says in there, at their sole discretion, if they determine that there is an emergency and they can't provide adequate water to their citizens, we're cut off. Do we have any sort of sense of how they need to prove that? I mean, it's at their sole discretion, but let's say that one day we're not on the council, you're not the city manager, and they say we're no longer in the business of giving Sierra Madre water, and all they have to do is manufacture some statement to the effect of, there's an emergency, we're no longer able to adequately give water to our residents, and we essentially have no recourse, right? So I guess
I think the hope is when I'm not the city manager, everyone's off council, we will have established and be operating a joint well that's not subject to the terms and conditions of emergency drought declaration. This, because it is a precursor, it is a wheeling agreement, so we don't want to be in a situation where we are superseding Arcadia's rights. But if we think back to the last drought, Arcadia was not impacted at all. The main basin was not impacted at all. If we're in a drought situation, this wheeling agreement, even if it's not joint operation, is likely our friend, because the East Raymond Basin at that point is in a severe critical state, whereas the main basin is likely doing much better.
Mm-hmm.
So Arcadia does have to have the safeguard when it's a wheeling agreement and not a joint operation, that they're not going to put our needs ahead of the needs of their citizens. And I think for this agreement, that's appropriate.
Mr. Prince, would you like to come up?
I think city manager put things very, very well. Water pun intended. And
I didn't even pick up on it, so good for you.
Everyone at the district, I mean, I never want to speak for everyone, but I would feel confident trying to do so here, is super excited that the city sort of handed us this super easy one in our lap. We just went through our own 5-year strategic planning process for the district, and our overall number one concern was supply of water. And I know it was said it would be cheaper for the district. Really, for us, water is money. It's not about money. We have no shareholders. We have no profits. It's about water. And it's cheaper in the sense that it's going to take less water because we don't have enough water, and there's a increasing demand for it. And so our number one concern in our strategic plan was securing sufficient water supply. And then we looked at the constraints on that supply, and the number one concern within that subset was Sierra Madre for the entire water district. And the 2-for-1 agreement, negotiated as an emergency connection, I don't think anyone can say with a straight face that it's sustainable the way we're relying on it right now. Everyone agrees and recognizes that we have to have a diversified supply, and there has to be something that, much like the mayor feared about Arcadia shutting it off, right now, if Met shut that off, we're in that same exact situation. And so this is a really, really big deal. And final point, the fact that the city manager highlighted this at the outset, this is main basin water. And for the water district, that is a huge deal. Our assistant general manager has kind of come up with this little passion project where he's reading all of the entirety of our board's minutes. We just celebrated our 60th anniversary. And he says that he has read almost all of the minutes now. And from the very beginning, 60 years ago until today, it was a constant problem that our board tried to solve in how do we get main basin water to Sierra Madre. We were the only community in the district that could not access main basin water. And I think, you know, we are all lucky to be in a group of players that might actually really solve that problem that has vexed generations and generations of people in each of our chairs. So it's a super exciting project. I have already told the general manager and Chris and Jose, I'm here to do whatever we need to bring it over the finish line, and it's going to be a big deal for the city.
That's great. Yeah, go ahead.
So, Mr. Prince, what is the next step now to move ahead with the well project?
Sure. So our general manager and I have met with the city manager and staff. We decided it was best, given our kind of gut feelings about our board, that this council take action first to approve the authorization to begin work towards the joint well, and then we would bring it to our board. I think that our board would likely take some action of support of the project, and then once we get an actual report or study that has a little bit harder and more reliable numbers, I think our board would then be prepared to take a position in terms of the extent of our support. But you know, when we just also, that same strategic planning session, went through all the numbers of the cost of water fix, of what we're going to be fronting the bill for the Delta tunnels.
Yep.
And that's in the hope of increasing our annual allotment in like 60 years by maybe 2%. All right, the amount of money we are going to be paying for that 2% of an annual allotment, it's drop in the bucket, water pun intended again, for what we could pay for this, and the amount of water freed up for the rest of the district is, it's in multiples. So, so our board will be very supportive of it. I'm in terms of next steps, I think getting a hard report with some real numbers on it would be what our board looks for.
Okay.
Mr. Pun Prince, it's reassuring to hear what at least the discussions are. This is not an important question, but I missed. Who read all of the minutes?
Our assistant general manager.
Oh my goodness.
It was our 60th anniversary, and we were toying around with like doing some kind of event or something, and he wanted to find out if we had ever done another event for another anniversary, and figured the only way to find out was to read every single board minute. So,
Yeah.
Wow.
got to really love water to do that.
Yeah. I know that when we discussed with your predecessor this project eventually come to fruition, the idea was that the district, the water district, would have the money to potentially pay for it. And I know that was always a big thing that we had discussed. What is the current view of the board? And I know I'm not trying to put you on the spot, you haven't voted on it yet, but what do you think the current view of the board is on that?
I think the current view of the board is, as I said, compared to the financial commitments we have no choice to be a part of. For example, water fix or the Oroville spillover repair bill. This is feasible.
Good. It's good to know.
And it's money, and I think I feel very confident saying on behalf of all my colleagues, this is the kind of money we would really want to spend.
Right.
You know, we kind of grind our teeth when we signed the check for Oroville for something which is a nauseating amount of money. This is what we want to be spending our money on.
Great. Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for being here.
Of course, thank
I
you.
appreciate it. We will open up for public comment. And seeing none, we'll bring it back for any comment and then a motion.
I think it's a really exciting project. I'm glad to see it happening.
Yeah, I mean, I would like to thank our city manager, Director Semino, and Mr. Reynoso, who's not here, Mr. Prince, for all the work, and please send the thanks to your general manager as well. And this has been something we've been talking about for a long time. So I do think, let's make sure that the motion, go ahead, did you have something to say?
Just basically the same thing. I've been on the water subcommittee now forever with Mayor Pro Tem, and we've been kicking around these ideas forever, and as if this was even possible. And it's possible now, and it's actually probably going to happen. And so everybody involved, all our staff, Chris and Jose and our city manager, Miles, everybody. This is a really a big deal, and it's very exciting. So good job.
Great job. And hopefully it gets done before, I mean, some of us may not be up here, but hopefully some of the members are still here when it happens. So that may be aggressive, but I don't know how long these take. Let's make sure the motion is both because option 1 doesn't actually say to authorize staff to work with the water district on the joint establishment, location, and operation of the well. So let's make sure the motion is to approve the wheeling agreement and also give that authorization.
Okay, I'll make that motion to approve the interconnection and to authorize staff to move forward with pursuing the well.
Second that.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Great job. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We look forward to hearing about progress on it as well. So, when do we pay the $25,000 check? Is it just
Arcadia is taken in front of their council next week, and assuming it's approved, we'd pay the prorated rate probably the beginning of the following month.
And we could demand the water within, as long as we give them 72 hours.
We could.
Okay, good. All right, the last item is the management compensation study, and Mr. Hernandez is,
I'm gonna start, Mayor. We've got a brief presentation and then discussion.
Great.
All right, so just as background, in December of 2018, the City Council directed staff to begin a management compensation study for the City of Sierra Madre, and at that same meeting, we were given direction to include not only peer cities, which is the common practice, but also to look at all of our competitors, to include the private sector, nonprofit, and any other relevant market data. When we get into this, there's going to be some terms that we want to make sure we're all clear on. I've found that when you do market compensation studies, and Councilmember Del Mar can probably confirm this, that people use all the terms interchangeably, and they use the terms that should mean the same thing differently. So for purposes of this presentation, minimum maximum rate of pay, we've got that. The two that will get tricky are mid-range, and what mid-range means is it's the middle that Sierra Madre pays. So if we're paying an employee $10, mid-range is $5. Midpoint is referring to the midpoint of what the market pays for that position. So if the market is paying someone $12 for that position, the midpoint would be $6, and the difference would be $1. So addition terms, we're going to talk about percent of market, and that's the percent of pay Sierra Madre provides is compared against the midpoint of the market. So the example, if you hear me say 80% of market, that means Sierra Madre is paying 80 cents for $1 that's being paid in the market. And then if you hear increase at mid-range, that would be a proposed rate of pay increase compared to the midpoint of market. So it's super clear. We'll see how we can make this go.
I'm already confused.
Yes. So the process we took is we surveyed the market to establish our peer cities, and we looked for similarity scores. After we had established who our peer cities were, we compared with private, nonprofit, and other relevant marketplace data. And we use that to determine the competitive market midpoint. That's what the market pays for the same positions. And then we calculated the current percent of market pay for Sierra Madre. So the interesting thing about identifying peer cities is there is no one that really looks like Sierra Madre. And we all say that all the time, but comparing ourselves to all the other cities in LA County, we found that if they looked like us by population and budget size, then they did not provide police, fire, and library services. And if they provided police, library, and fire services, they did not look like us by population and budget size. We're an extreme outlier. Yep. The cities that we are most often compared to, like South Pasadena or San Marino, they are our size and they provide services, but they also have a special tax to fund public safety in San Marino or library in South Pasadena. So again, there's no one that perfectly aligns with us. These are the cities that we found on the left, the most similar cities, again, San Marino, Signal Hill, and South Pasadena. There's reasons why they look like us in the similarity index, but again, in practice, if you're San Marino and you have a public safety tax, that's a little bit different than what we have. So as we get into the positions that we looked at, these three positions, community services, finance director, human resources director, we did the full gamut, public sector, private sector, nonprofit. Police chief obviously is public sector only. And then the other one that was public works director, we decided not to do private sector because of the breadth that our public works director covers, everything from construction to engineering to facilities and maintenance. So we compared them with contracted services that cities often get, and we use here with Willdan or other construction services. So this is not to read, it is a data point, but what this is essentially showing is the current range of where Sierra Madre is at on the left, and then the market range midpoint. And the important thing is not to try and do the math on all the numbers. This is why we calculated the market. So if you follow this across, what that's telling us is our police chief position gets paid 75.9% of the market, or 76 cents for every dollar that the market pays. We go down to the bottom and we do an average, and 79.7 is not so bad, but then we cycle back up to where the finance director is, and at 88.4% of the market. And council will recall the reason for that is when we replaced the finance director position, we moved them into the assistant city manager slot and canceled that position. So that position is being paid higher comparatively than the other positions in Sierra Madre. So when you have an outlier, instead of using the average, you do the median, and our median is 77.4%. So again, we're paying 70 cents on the dollar. When we translate that percentage into the difference and we look at just the cities that are most similar to us, we see on average we pay about $30,000 less than our most similar peer cities do for the same job. The highest point of difference is the police chief at an average of $42,000, and again, the lowest is not surprising. It's the finance director because of the action council took last year at again just over $12,000. So we're hoping for discussion and direction tonight. Council, we've laid out three options. One is council sets the pay and compensation for the city, and it's within your purview to decide the current rate of pay is in line with the compensation philosophy of the city. You can have a discussion about setting the market rate based on a midpoint of market. An example would be 85%. We've seen recently a peer city, South Pasadena, set their target at 90%. And option number three is do not set a market rate, but you can increase a range based on market data. So, for example, increase the range of pay 10%. As opposed to tying it to a number. I think the essential difference is option three, moving forward would give council more control. The decisions would come back and have to be ratified, whereas option two would be more of a maintenance situation where staff would go out and say, council wanted us to be at 85%. We did a market survey, we're at 83%, and we move it up, or we're at 87%, so we don't do anything that year. With that, we're happy to take questions.
I'll let whoever wants to go first.
Yeah, just one question. Like you mentioned, South Pasadena is set theirs to 90%. Do we know who they compared to their peer cities? Did they use the same peers?
I'm unsure, Mayor Pro Tem, who or if they went through the same process.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I'll save my comments for later then.
My question is just if you can put back one of those slides just as we were discussing it about the I think it was one of the tables back one more.
There were so many exciting tables.
I know. Oh no, forward one. I just wanted to get a feel for. So you're looking at that second option was moving towards 85% of that midpoint of that far right column.
That is an example that we put forward. Yes.
That's my only question. I just wanted to take a moment to look at it.
Councilmember Goss.
Preface my question by saying that I feel like, just impressionistically, we have a very high quality management team, person by person. And so they are there based on what we're presently paying. And I guess I'm interested in results. I'd like to keep them and attract other people at least as good as them. So I'm interested in your professional assessment of this more than my guesswork on this, because I'm willing to go higher, but I really need to know that we need that to be able to attract and keep the kinds of people we have right now.
So I think we've experienced, in my experience in the past 2 years, Councilmember Goss, when the people we tend to lose are people that have been here a while and are very talented, performing very high quality work for the city. They go somewhere else, and the person that we replace them with tends to have fewer qualifications or less of a background in the experience that we're looking for. So the philosophy of Sierra Madre that I've taken is we invest in people early, and we probably give them positions and titles before they're quite ready, and then we give them a lot of support so they can perform to the level that they do. And it's a model that has worked. Having said that, I have had conversations with two members of the management team who turned down jobs that would have paid them $35,000 more per year. And when you ask them why they did that, they're loyal to the city. They feel the city's been good to them. It's a good place to work, and they want to honor that. They have unfinished work. But then they also say, gosh, that's a lot of money to turn down, and I do think about what would happen if I've taken it. So it's not a slippery slope argument. We have been successful, in my experience, replacing the people we're replacing, the people we lose with, tend to need more training, more guidance, more direction, and more time to become fully functional in their role.
Thank you.
My question, and I have two. Why do we use midpoint? I mean, why not just use maximum and compare that? And I ask because I just wonder, are management personnel being paid the average of the range, or the midpoint of the range, or more of you getting paid on the high end? And therefore, whatever the comparison is might be skewed in disfavorably towards the employees that we're looking at, or favorably. I don't know how it skews, but using the midpoint would make sense if most of them are getting paid the midpoint.
We compare midpoint to midpoint, so the comparison wouldn't matter as far as if the rate of pay changed. But the reason you use midpoint is when you're calculating some 160 points of data, you're just trying to come up with a number that tells the story, as opposed to calculating if there's a mean and median for the high and low. And now I'm giving council two data points. That's the high and the low, because we pay in ranges.
Yep.
As opposed to 1 point. So it just kind of makes it easier to give the percentage story.
Yeah.
As far as where our employees are at there across the board, dependent mostly on performance, but also based on the amount of time they've been here.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you'll find some on the lower end. We have, I believe, 2 that are at step 10 right now. We have 1 that's at step 1, and then everyone else is in between.
Okay. Yeah, so that's interesting. What if we were to compare the high points to the high points? Where would we be? Would it be around the same?
It would be the same percentage.
Same percentage.
Because we would be taking our high percentage versus the high percentage of the market.
Mm-hmm.
But now we're only showing the high end of pay, and that's not what our experience would be, because we would have to compare the high end of pay for an employee who's at step 10 and then the low for an employee who's at step 1. So we're just it's an average of averages.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm just wondering if it's realistic, because what's realistic is if one of my managers wants more money, I can immediately put them to the high end, right?
So let me pull a slide back up. So on the first slide, so we have the maximum,
right,
and the midpoint and the minimum. So again, if you're going 122 to 160 versus 135 to 180,
should be the same.
Well, the differences are going to be if other cities have a wider or shorter range.
Mm-hmm.
So again, the reason we calculate the midpoint is to try and get the midpoint of
mm-hmm.
the range of 160 different data points in 11 different cities.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and I don't know how this, whether it favors us as management up here, or if it favors, the employees to look at midpoint versus the high end.
yeah.
Can I answer that? So when you're doing a compensation analysis, you don't look at the people, you look at the
Yeah.
position, right? So you're looking at the position and what the skills are, and that's why you always go with the midpoint.
Yeah.
Because regardless of how fabulous these people are, you're establishing your compensation philosophy and your analysis based on the current position and the skills and the
Yeah.
requirements. So it's an industry standard that you always go with the midpoint, because that's what you usually will bring in. An experienced person will be at the midpoint, and someone less experienced would be at the entry level. You will never bring anybody in at the maximum level unless you're absolutely desperate and they're God or something. But when you're looking at this, you need to take the faces away and just look at the positions.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I wonder if we were to, and I think this might skew, if we were to look at the high point versus the high point, it's going to look worse, I think. It's going to be less than 80%, and that's my point, is that it looks good when you compare midpoint to midpoint. But the reality is, if we're trying to keep our finance director, and he or she is being hired away to Glendale or Pasadena, the best we can do is say, we'll go to the max, okay? Where in Glendale or Pasadena, they can also say, well, we'll take you to the max. To Councilmember Del Mar's point, it's a good market, so people might be offering maxes more than they used to. And so I guess I'm just trying to make a point that it doesn't look too bad when you're comparing the midpoints, but in reality,
It does look bad, though.
well, that's in the eye of the beholder, I guess. I thought it was going to be worse, actually, than 80%.
Yeah, I think I may have misunderstood the question. What we typically get is employees can take a lateral or a demotion and get a raise, or our top step. Our goal for our top step right now is to get that into the first, second, or third step of our peer cities. So if we compared max to max, I think you are correct. It would look worse, because even our max will be
exactly
below their midpoint.
And that's my point. And I guess that's my point as a non-HR specialist. Like, I look at that and say, okay, there's actually way more discrepancy and disparity there. And so it's just something to think about. And then the purpose really of this, I mean, is to potentially do something about it within our philosophy. And I know we just established our philosophy, but is the big thing here is retention, I assume, and recruitment. So where specifically did this come from? Were there certain, positions, industry, certain positions within within our management structure that are more, I guess, complicated in getting people and keeping people here than others? I mean, we obviously saw finance, there was difficulty there, but what drove this from your perspective?
We do have positions where we're extremely vulnerable right now, and also into the future. We have some directors who have spent their entire career here, and we essentially get them at a discount. And when they retire, trying to hire someone with the same skill set at that pay range will be nearly impossible. That's in the future. We have today, we also have directors who are constantly being offered additional positions. Retention is becoming more difficult, and we say that in Sierra Madre, we understand we're not going to pay the same as our peer cities, but we do want to make it a little bit harder for people to turn the position down when it's offered to them.
Yeah. Okay.
Do you ever look at all of your internal equity as well?
Yes, Councilmember Del Mar, we do. One of the reasons, in addition to the council direction in 2018 and how we brought this forward, is the management group has not received COLA, where the negotiated rates of pay, and then also the unrepresented employees, we've given COLA or raises or both every year for the past 4 years. We haven't provided the same for the management team. And the reason for that is when I started, everyone was a brand new director. And we weren't quite sure how people and everyone was going to perform, how the city was going to perform. Now that we've had time to watch the performance, the internal equity piece is becoming more pressing, where we have people in supervisory positions that are making more than people in management positions. So it's not just the compression, but there's also equity to consider as well.
And do you look at, when you bring someone in new, the years of service the other people have paid and looked at their pay as well? Have you ever made adjustments for that?
So it's yes, Councilmember Del Mar, I've had that conversation as late as 3 o'clock this afternoon with the police chief. So we do have those conversations as well.
Another quick question. Assuming that we make a decision, whether it's tonight or a different time, let's say that we say, yes, let's base it on the market rate and the midpoint versus a salary range. In terms of process, what would that look like? Do you have to make, I assume you're working with the unions, you'd have to still make agreements there, and when could full implementation be in place?
So this is separate from the union agreements. We signed two
it's management.
2 5-year agreements. This is
Okay.
unrepresented management.
Got it.
There would actually, the process, how this would come back if council doesn't, in this example, want further discussion, we'd simply bring the classification and compensation schedule back with the amended tables. From a practical financial impact, this is not asking for, to give management raises across the board. We still, on management, do pay for performance. So even if the range is increased, you should not expect that all the directors, all the managers now have a pay increase, because they still have to perform and move through the process.
It's helpful, thank you.
So we're approving the range, not a raise?
Correct. It would be, council approves the range, and then the rate of pay is under my purview as a city manager.
Okay. Open up for public comment, questions. And, we'll bring it back. Any thoughts? Yeah.
I'll go first. First of all, I just want to thank our city manager and our staff. I mean, looking at this, it's really encouraging that we have good employees, in spite of the fact that we're really paying them less than what the market is showing as comparable. So I think I just want to commend everybody for you, Gabe, as to creating a really good work environment here, because I know this isn't the case in other cities that pay well, but still they have turnover because folks are really not happy working there. At the same time, it's great that you have showed us this, because we do want to make sure that our employees are treated fairly. And, we are deferring to you. As you just said, it's in your purview to determine the pay of the individuals here. It's our job to set the brackets here. So, in my mind, I just want to give you the right tools to be able to manage the staff appropriately, because in my mind, you are clearly managing your staff in the interests of Sierra Madre, and I appreciate that very much. So my thought right off is that I really have always been against setting a compensation rate at a percentage of somebody else's pay, because what happens is, like you just mentioned, South Pasadena just recently went to 90%. Well, Pasadena might decide, okay, well, we're at 110% and they just went to 90, so now we have to go higher. Then South Pasadena makes theirs go higher, then we have to match that. So that just drives me insane, actually. I just think that's a bad policy. So I like number 3, and what I would like you to do is to come back and figure out what the ranges should be for the various positions and give it to council for approval. And I think that gives our city manager the flexibility to act on behalf of the staff, and gives the city council the proper oversight authority. So I know it's a little bit more work, because every couple of years you got to go through this exercise again, but I think it's worth it to make sure that we're not doing something that is formulatic, like the 85% of market rate, because, I mean, how do we even know what that should be, And it might be different for different positions. You may just disagree that for a certain position, that's paid too high, and it shouldn't be that high, but for another position, it should be higher or more broad. So I'd like to give the city manager that flexibility instead of tying them to a hard number like that. So, and besides, I mean, what would be how would you even determine what the appropriate rate is? I wouldn't know. You'd have to tell us, and we'd have to approve it, right? So I'm really in favor of number 3 and just having the city manager come back with a salary schedule, and we'll comment on it at that time, or approve it or disapprove it or make changes. That's my recommendation.
Okay.
So I'll comment. I think in concept, I mean, this is definitely something we need to address. This has been an issue that we've heard internally about, and also publicly about where our compensation is in comparison to other cities, given that we're very unique. And at the same time, I think over the last couple of years, city manager, you've taken really a strong leadership role in ensuring that we have the right structure that meets the needs of our city. We've made, I know, a lot of changes. Morale seems to be amazing, and I just don't want to take away from that. And I do want to ensure that we are able to retain those, especially those that are turning down jobs that are offering $40,000 more. So in theory, I think yes, yes, yes. I actually just differ with Mayor Pro Tem in the approach, and I think it's in the work that I do, I think it would be easier as a manager to deal with a midpoint of the market. And if I understood it correctly, you would also adjust the salary ranges anyway. So the midpoint of the 85% would be within that salary range, and you might even establish a whole new salary range just to ensure that 85% midpoint is within that range.
I think, Councilmember Arizmendi, I think the benefit to an organization of setting it to a market point is it's a maintenance issue. We can calculate what the percentage is and simply bring items forward. The benefit of choosing a range is it gives more direct control to council, and they touch the pay ranges more. So there are different approaches with different benefits. To your specific comment, yes, we would go out, and if council said, for example, 85%, then we would calculate through the ranges and move our midpoint accordingly. Under that example, the finance director would not receive a change in rate of pay because that position is greater than 85%, whereas the police chief in this example would.
And so, well, let me ask a follow-up question to that. Let's say that this council says, yay, we're going to all agree on the midpoint of the market, this 85%, 90%, whatever the percentage is. We can still dictate or authorize or ask city manager to come back within a certain amount of time, whatever, 2-3 year check-ins, or and see where we're at and see if it is still within the what we had assumed we were authorizing at that time.
That's correct, Councilmember.
This time, yeah.
I think the only sticking point on that is in government, typically, you've established a percentage range. It would be much harder to move that range down if it was appropriate, as opposed to the ask would be to maintain or increase. So though we could come back to council, I think it would gain a certain amount of momentum that is the philosophy of the city.
Okay. So in general, I definitely want us to reconsider how we are determining our ranges, and I would prefer option 2 to give a little bit more flexibility to management. I would not be opposed to 3 altogether if that's where this council went, but I prefer going with option 2.
Okay. Councilmember Goss or Delmar?
I pretty much agree with you, Councilmember Arizmendi. I would prefer 2 as well, for pretty much the same reasons. Both, I think that Mayor Pro Tem was very clear, and I think I could go along with that too. Look, I think what we're really interested in here is results, the bottom line, and I have a lot of faith in you as their city manager. If we don't have to set tight parameters around you and give you more flexibility, I'm totally good with that. So I have a lot of flexibility on this, 2 or 3.
Okay.
So I want to commend you all for doing a really good analysis. I like the way that you set up your scoring on how you did that. What I'm gratified to see is that our midpoints are really relatively close to each other, so we don't have any jobs that are way below that we really need to bring up or way above that we need to hold. I do, and it's only because, having some sort of structure and a midpoint that we can shoot for is always the best. I think it's fair. I always hate to have someone with that much discretion, because then that opens up, could open up for potential lawsuits for unfairness and internal equity and equal pay and equal jobs. But I am happy to see that where we are. And of course, our midpoint should always be 100%. That's what we want to have, right? We want to have 100%. And I do think that we are in a financially stable market now here in the city. I think we're in a place in the compensation world where things are started settling down. We had quite a bit of increase in the last, I would say, 5 or 6 years, where positions were getting $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 more a year, and we haven't seen that. I think the highest that we've gone in the last 2 years is a 3% across the board for all positions. So, and that's in the industry. So I would certainly like to see a midpoint and reward our fine folk for sticking this out. And also remember, it's not so much the dollars as much as it is that employees just want to feel valued. So you can pay them all the money in the world, but if they don't feel valued or that they're contributing, that they're making a difference, they're going to leave. If you pay them a fair wage, they know that they're valued, they have input, they're going to stick around. And I think that's something that you do, and your management staff as a whole works really well together.
Great. Where I am on this is, and I think this is where we started with the philosophy, and really with this study, was to be flexible and really with an eye towards recruitment and retention. And so I think that I thought we had talked about, not taking the approach of anchoring ourselves to some percentage based on market data, because that's almost too easy, right? I mean, that's almost not what Gabe has done here, which has been, we're going to look at each position and realize that some are going to be harder to fill than others. We've seen in public works that, on a management perspective too, it's really hard to get really good public works people to stay, because those types of professionals are needed now everywhere. And so we need potentially to put their positions at a 95% rate. Whereas, maybe finance, we'll just use that as an example, even though that's high right now. It doesn't need to be that high. And so when you're setting a midpoint of, let's say, 85 or 90%, that doesn't necessarily tie your hands as a manager. You can increase that, you can decrease it. But I guess by tying it, does it automatically make some of these ranges higher than they need to be? And to Councilmember Del Mar's point, I mean, there is a view that maybe this should be 100% no matter what. I guess I don't have that view necessarily. I mean, I think we should be higher than we are. I think this is too low, and I'd like to be much higher than where we are. And I was doing math on my phone. If you compare the maximum to the maximum, it's about the same. So it doesn't skew it at all. So we are too low. And I guess my question is to you, because I initially liked the Mayor Pro Tem's approach, which is have you go back, come up with ranges based on the market data. But I'm wondering if all that is going to do is you're going to go back and really come up with a midpoint percentage anyway. Because, if that's all you're going to do, then we can make that decision for you. But I would like to know whether you would prefer flexibility in, again, to this public works versus finance versus HR dichotomy. I think that those percentages are going to be different, right? I think that we might be seeing different percentages based on that.
So I think what you're getting at is the internal equity piece that we talk about.
Yeah.
Setting a...
Well, and the market, and just where the market is right now, right?
Right. I think setting a market midpoint, the concern on my end would be both that some positions would be too low, but also that some positions would be too high.
Too high, yeah.
But it does address the internal equity piece, it does address the maintenance piece. So I think I had a couple of phone calls from council members saying, why is there not a recommendation on this? And we're saying the compensation philosophy of council, it's 100% yours to choose what we do, and we can tell you the benefits and drawbacks of either approach. And I do think you've hit on the benefit of providing flexibility. Of course, we appreciate that. We also appreciate the benefit of certainty. And they're it's both sides of a coin. And we wouldn't go back and calculate a midpoint if council asked us to go to a range. We would come back and we calculate ranges that we thought were appropriate, but we would take into account the internal equity piece. So you'd still see a tight clustering of positions.
And if I
Go
could
ahead.
just say, when we talk about eternal equity, what you don't want is to set up your staff that have been here for 10 years and then have to bring someone else in at a higher rate, and you still have staff that is just kind of, 3% each year. So when you do a compensation analysis, you do it like every 3 or 4 years, is you really want to make sure that all of your management is making, based on their market at a same percentage level. Because, even if it's a critical job or a position, what you don't want, and that's kind of what happened here, is we have a public works director who's been here for a long time, and then we had to up the finance director to get someone in here, and now you have that big disparity, and that's what you want to avoid, and that's why you do an analysis like this.
And
Make one more comment too, is just one other reason I just don't like option 2 either, because I don't want to be labeled as an 85% city. By going with option 3, for you'd have to figure it out. Well, it wouldn't be written in our policy that we only want to pay 85 or 90% of market,
Right.
So once again, this gives the city manager more philosophy. But,
Unless we wanted to set it, we could set it 100%, right? I mean, we could.
but I wouldn't want to do that
Right.
because that
I
just,
wouldn't
it's
either.
it just propagates inflation.
Right. I guess I'm sorry, and Councilmember Zamendi had a question or a comment, so I'll go to her.
Well, again, going back to, it's still a midpoint, and I think we have to remember it's still a midpoint of 85 or 100%, wherever that is. But I think to the mayor's point, wouldn't you still be calculating the ranges based on the
I'm just really
midpoint?
confused, and that was going to be my question. How is this going to be any different, 2 versus 3?
The 85% is going to be a calculation based on market, whereas we have a range and step system in place. So if we go with the range, you'll see a recommendation of increasing it by range percentage as opposed to market percentage. So likely we'd come back and say, drop steps 1 through 4, make 4 steps higher on the other end. That's going to be equal on a pay rate across the board to all directors. So that's the equity piece. Whereas if we calculate the market at 85%, we'll come back and we'll say Public Works Director's at 76%, there's going to be an increase there, whereas the Finance Director's at 89%, so there will be no increase there.
And it will leave us to do that math to figure out the percentage.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like option number 3 is a lot more work for you. Oh, go ahead.
If I could interrupt, I just want to make it clear that the agenda item before you tonight, it's not for you to set an official policy. You shouldn't feel like you're being tied down to, well, now we're an 85% of median city. That's not really what this was for. It's just a discussion so that you can provide some guidance to the city manager, who will then later take your direction, look at everything, and bring you back something, probably first in closed session, and then ultimately an open session with recommendations and the cost of any adjustments. So you're not being asked to set an official policy tonight that, hey, we're shooting for 85% of median.
Got it. Yeah, and the reason why I ask is because I think Councilmember Zamendi kind of hit on the point. I would like you to see you do both. Come back, because it's easy to set a midpoint range. We could say 90% right now. I mean, I would still like to see you do 3, and I think that's a little bit more work. But if this is just a discussion and giving direction, why not have you do both? And then we can come back and decide, well, which one actually seems fair and actually is addressing, I think, again, recruitment, retention, and then internally, the equity to make sure that, our managers are being treated regardless of whether they're looking for other jobs. Because this shouldn't be, oh, we're only worried about, those that are actively or seeking or being poached. I mean, it should be for, obviously making sure that we're rewarding those who have stayed as well. So, I mean, unless you guys have are you guys okay with having him do both? Or
I actually feel strongly more now about about doing the midpoint, and the reason why is, I mean, it's really based on the study. So we went out, we got comps on that in all of these different industries, and the ranges in my mind, and I could be wrong, are numbers that could have been established who knows when, and I don't even know what those are based on. I feel more confidence in the midpoint numbers because, at least with this management study, it really is based on comps in all of these different industries.
I'd see, and this is where I'm confused. I assume if you do that number 3, the two-step range increase, you're going to be using this market data, aren't you?
We would calculate the market midpoint.
Yes, yeah, this is
Right.
Yeah.
but After we applied the range,
Right.
we would show you the percentage
Got it.
that you're at.
All right.
Again, then the maintenance piece would go away. So these seem similar, and we say people
When you say maintenance, can you be clear? What do you mean the maintenance?
So if council's establishing a percentage of market, then there's no more guesswork. Everyone knows what we're going to pay and how we're going to maintain it. If we go with a range, then we'll come back as we've done, and we'll bring a new range forward when we want to make adjustments.
In the future, in the
Correct.
future iterations, that's what you're saying.
Right, the problem is, like I said, when somebody raises theirs, you're gonna automatically raise ours.
Well, it doesn't matter if you do a percentage, a compa ratio of 100%, or you increase the ranges. When anybody else doing a market rate is going to look at what our range is or what our price is. They're not going to look at what the salary is. They're not going to look at what our,
Can
compa
I
ratio
just
is.
say that when South Pasadena used a comp study, which is, it's what is done, and they never set a policy. What they did was they used the information and the data from their comp study in order to inform what their bargaining position should be for their various employee unions. So, and at the end of the day, and so that was bargained at the table.
So they
and
don't have a policy of
No,
90%?
no,
Oh.
they do not. I don't know any city that has a firm policy. But this is a good discussion to have out in the open. But you do not need, and it's not even on your agenda tonight, to set an official
We
policy.
understand that.
Yeah.
We clearly understand that.
And you don't need to.
And you don't want to put a percentage in there in your policy, because there may be a point in time when you're not so financial stable that you that you can't go up to that 90.
Well,
Oh,
okay,
then-
see,
yeah,
well,
then
that's
I'm
what
confused then, yeah.
that part
Yeah.
I didn't understand.
Me neither.
Like I said, if I look at number 2, it's to establish, it's the concept. I know we're not picking the number, but it means there will be a number which our policy will be based on. Understand?
Yeah.
But I did,
How you're explaining, Mayor Pro Tem, is correct.
yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So if we choose number 2, you'll come back with a number, and that will be the number
For now.
for.
Correct.
Well, for now, until we go through this exercise again, and until we do, we will adjust periodically according to that number that you will bring back to us.
That is correct.
And if I can just say, even
So-
though we give a number, right? If we can't afford it, if the budget can't afford it, then yeah.
But that number will be a policy. It'll be part of our policy. We will have established a number as part of our policy. Whether it's 90% or 85% or 100%, it's going to be on a piece of paper as a policy.
That's correct.
And that's what I don't like. Yeah.
So what, Madam City Attorney, the South Pass, what exactly did they do?
There was no policy set. What they did was use a market and comp study basically, they recognize that everyone is competing for the same pool of employees, for qualified, good employees. And the ability to retain and attract new employees is a variety of things. Salary is only one of them. And they looked at, well, do we want to be a city? We can't afford to be right in the middle. So we're not shooting for that. Do we want, how far down below medium do we want to be? We know in a perfect world, sure, we'd love to be above medium, but we can't afford that. So we're not even shooting for that. This was a discussion to inform the negotiators at the bargaining table, because that's, and council will participate in that. And then the negotiators take their direction and they go forward. But at no time did the council ever establish we're going to be 90% of median, we're going to be any percent of median. It was a tool that they used to try to establish what would be fair as they bargain. And Gabe is trying to do the same thing, and it's a good process.
Number 2 says here. what's
Right,
in front of us.
we're not trying, for clarity, we're not trying to replicate South Pasadena. We are giving council 2 distinct options that, for some reason, I'm explaining is very similar, which they're not. One is a maintenance option where we're asking council to set a policy for what compensation will be. To the Councilmember Arizmendi's question previously, one of the drawbacks of that is typically it's harder to make those numbers go lower, and it's a maintenance issue. The other option is to provide increases based on our current range system, which is different. And at the end, we will show you what the market rate is as an information point, but that is not what would be driving our decision making. This one would be more budget oriented from what we have now.
More judgment oriented.
Correct,
Yeah.
more subjective, yes.
Yeah, and I think just based on that, I mean, when we started talking about this 6 or 9 months ago, I think really the latter is what I thought we were driving at, which is we have different needs in different departments, and the market is responding differently, and we need some flexibility in being able to recruit, retain, and hire. And so that's why I'm confused as to why we even do number 2. You know, I just think that if we have a need in certain departments more than others, especially in management, you would think that you want number 3 so that you can just stay nimble and that you can stay, you know, ahead of the market, right? Rather than number 2 almost seems reactive.
So the difference in it, again, is what Councilmember Del Mar described happening with the Public Works Director and the Finance Director, is because we don't have tied to market percentage. We have one director who's performing a similar government function that's at 89% of the market, and another director who's at 76% of the market. So the third option typically leads to more reactive, subjective decisions.
But you are going to incorporate, you're talking about equity. You're going to incorporate equity, I would hope, in number 3, right? I mean, you're going to do that to make sure, because I think that's a very valid point. But I would assume that number 3, actually, you'll address that through number 3.
We will address it every time
Yeah.
we come back in front of council. Again, these are different approaches with different issues that we'll have to manage. And on number 2, for example, we'll have people that get what we call as redlined. They're not going to get a raise, they're not going to get a COLA because they're above market. And that's something we would have to manage with number 2.
Yeah.
So it's a different set of factors that we'd have to manage. Either one of them brings positives, either one of them brings things we have to manage.
Yeah.
I strangely now would like both of those options, just so I can understand really the difference. But before I even propose that or ask that, I'm curious, you would just be doing it for these management positions, correct?
Correct, just for the
Okay,
management
so it's
positions.
not like you'd have to go through full-blown all the positions. So I don't know,
We would
Mayor,
do
I
it-
think you're right.
That's what I'd
Let's go back
I'd wanted to
both.
see both, but I don't also want to, you know, this is obviously not a huge rush, but, you know.
We've already completed the work,
Oh.
so we have both.
There you go, both.
Well, see, and that was my point too, is that if you do 3, you'll still report to us where it is in the market.
Correct.
So there will be an overall number, whether it's 85 or it's 90, but when you roll it all up, there will be a number associated with that.
Mm-hmm.
The number is still
Yeah,
there,
So
Mayor.
if you do 3, you're automatically going to get 2.
Well,
You
Yeah.
might, but no, but actually,
think
that's a
so.
good
No,
question,
but-
because
but
number
see,
three,
but
the number
then
will be different.
Well, no, because when you roll it all together, you will come up with a number in the aggregate that our midpoints are X percent of market, when you roll it all up.
Mhm.
So you'll have it.
That's right.
Then it's only a question of policy. Do we want to maintain that number going forward?
So Mayor Pro Tem is correct. Number 3 is very similar to what we're doing today. So just as we calculated the number of, I think it was 77.9%, there is a number that exists that we would calculate. So to that point, number 3 is most similar to what we're doing right now.
But it's an average of the aggregate, not a midpoint of a position.
It's the average of all the midpoints as compared to the average of the positions we're studying.
But we could look at them individually and see the number. And again, I mean, why, we would not want to have every position at a set number, because that does not reflect your and our individual circumstances by position. It's already in here too. When you compare these positions, they are not 100% apples to apples. Every one of these is different for different reasons. So I'm just like, I just can't say this enough, is that I just want to be sure that we're not locked into a number that we dream up, and we give our city manager the flexibility to use his expertise and judgment to create these ranges that we will then approve. It's really just that simple.
And I think we also have to establish that this is not just for these positions, right?
Not for the ones that were on the.
Right. So this would be if somebody leaves the city, those would be the ranges that we're looking at. And you want to make sure that your ranges that you have when you're hiring someone are within market and how, right? So your midpoint, just because you have a midpoint doesn't mean that's what people get paid.
Exactly.
They could get paid based on their performance closer to the maximum. It's just that midpoint that you want to have, that we look at to say, for really more for internal equity, that everybody's gonna, the midpoint's gonna be here, but it's up to the discretion of the supervisor where they're gonna fall, our current people, and when you hire
Yeah,
someone.
when you're gonna hire, somebody is interviewing for a job, you might easily agree on what the starting salary is gonna be, but somebody might decline the job because there's not enough headroom for me to grow here.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you've already done the work,
Yes.
why don't you
let's
just
bring
come
it
back with 2 and
We're
3?
happy to, Mayor.
All right. Great. Well, this
But
has
really,
been very
great
helpful.
job. That
Yeah.
was, I mean, that's,
This has been very,
this
very,
is a
very
lot of
helpful.
work to do. It really is, so.
Okay. Let's see, that's the end of our formal agenda. Any items for future agendas?
I think Gary, was Gary?
Oh, I'm sorry, did I not open this up for public comment? You've, come on forward. I apologize.
We wound up talking too
Yeah.
much there.
Very Hood with Baldwin. Listening to what you folks are saying, I had to ask, and I found out we have no bonus programs, no incentive programs for the city. And I'm thinking, if someone from Public Works comes up and saves the city $50,000, or they come up with something that makes it safer and they've saved the city, do we have, or could we have, a bonus program so that if the city manager saves the city $10 million, that at the end of the year he might get a bonus? If one of the guys who works out in Public Works and comes up with an idea that we should buy these in lots of 100 instead of 1,000, or we should buy them in lots of 10,000 instead of 100, and they save the city money over a period of time where this person may be considered to have a little bonus, and that's a good incentive for employees to figure out a way to save money, and that way their salaries that are locked in wouldn't really be locked in, because if you have somebody that does something exceptional, he could get a bonus. Just a thought. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay. I mean, it's, yeah, incentivizing innovations, I think very, very good idea. We can discuss that at a later point when you bring this back, because I think it's something to consider. It's not very common in government. I don't know if it was when you invented the life-saving device for the fire department. Did you get a bonus for that? Oh, see? I mean, there you go. Okay. Items for future agendas?
I have new business.
Okay, new business.
So I am announcing tonight that I'm stepping down from city council. Steve and I are moving to Yorba Linda to be closer to our kids, and my parents are going to move from Carson City to move in with us due to some health problems. We've been debating this for a while, but the opportunity was there and the necessity was there. And it happened a lot quicker than we thought, because we're actually in escrow for a house and we'll be moving out at the end of the month. And I just want to say I appreciate all of my colleagues and the city manager and the city attorney and all the staff that are here. It's been a great, great pleasure. I've been here for 13 years and realized for 10 of those, I've either been on the general plan or the city council. So Yorba Linda is going to be, have to do something really magnificent to top Sierra Madre.
Yeah, well, you know, this isn't going to be the formal ceremony, but we're obviously all going to miss you. And, you know, it's bad news for the city, good news for Yorba Linda. And now we just have to contact all of our elected officials to come and give Councilmember Delmar a proper send-off. When's the last meeting that you'll be at?
The very last one I can be at is the 22nd.
Oh,
Okay.
the next meeting.
Next meeting.
October, so it's this next meeting. Okay.
'Cause
Well,
we'll
make
be out
sure.
of here.
We got to get
And
a
if
cake.
anybody wants a townhouse, we'll be putting up the house as soon as we move out.
Okay. Well, more on the 22nd. So thank you for that. Any other new business? All right, motion to adjourn?
Second.
All right, and I don't hear any objections, so we'll adjourn. Thank you very much.
Good time today. Look at that.